Good afternoon, schönen Nachmittag. I would like to welcome everyone to our second interview. This interview is going to be mainly in English. My name is Elisa Maybeck. I am a member of the association C'l'Europe. It is Europe, es ist Europa. This is an association for debate, for international debate, for exchanging views, for exchanging information, mainly about Europe, but also about the world around Europe. And I'm here today with Reinhard Kluczek from Pan-Europa Austria. Danke, dass du dir Zeit nimmst. And you're more than welcome to ask questions if you have any. And the most important person today, the person being interviewed or the expert, is Alexandre Fernier. Merci pour prendre le temps. Thank you for taking the time to answer a few questions. But before I pass the word to you, I would like to say a few words just in general about the topic. Today's interview is actually like part of a bigger series we hopefully are able to do, revolving around the topic of the European city of the future. And if you think about this topic, the European city of the future, it's a rather broad topic. So you have to kind of divide it into, different aspects and different subcategories, because it is almost impossible to cover it in a 20-minute interview. And for today's interview, we chose, mobility, transportation, and especially automation. And since I'm nowhere near of being an expert on those topics, we have Alexandre here, who can hopefully enlighten us and give us a little bit of insight into this topic. Before we start with the topic, with the interview, maybe you can introduce yourself, Alexandre. Just tell us a little bit about your person, about your education, your profession, just as much as you would like to share.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. Happy New Year to everyone.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Eliza. Yeah, so my name is Alexandre Fernier. I'm part of the French, of the association, C'l'Europe. I'm personally French. I live in Lyon, but I work for an Austrian company based in Graz called AVL. And it's a company that specializes on engineering services and that's working on automation and validation of full automated vehicles. I'm rather new in that company, so you very nicely said I was an expert. I'll do my best to try to enlighten everyone, but this is a new exercise for me. So
okay, thank you. Then, let's dive right into the topic and maybe start like at the very core, at the basis. What are some of tomorrow's automation features and new mobilities? Are there different types? What can you tell us about that?
So automation is a very broad subject. People usually think right away of the Google car that tries to navigate completely alone, but this is actually full automation. There are many different features that will help towards automation, and we can classify them in five different categories. There's what's called forward collision prevention. So these are all the systems that will try to mitigate the number of accidents or the consequences of accidents. They are automated systems, so that's why they're part of automation, but their goal is not to navigate the car, it's merely to protect its occupants. There's a second category, which is parking and backing assisting, which already exists in a few cars, where the car is able to park itself without the driver doing anything. Then there are braking, pressure, and anti-rollover, so stability features that are already embedded in most cars. And then, and maybe that will fit more into um, the idea of the city of the future, there are two relatively new features that are part of automation, which are the lane and side assist. Many new cars are equipped with systems that keep the car in the lane so it doesn't derive from the lane, and typically called the lane keeping assist systems, but also the most commonly known as ACC, adaptive cruise control, which will regulate the speed of the car to a car that's ahead of the car, and thus maintain a safe distance between the two, so that if you're not paying attention, and um, the car will automatically regulate the speed to the car that's in front of you. And then the last category, which is even newer, is the driver state monitoring and communication. So they're not exactly automated systems in itself, but they are part of the automated chain. The goal of those systems is to detect what the driver state is. And so the driver state can be many things. It can be someone who's not paying attention or missed important information. For example, if you're looking in the rear mirror while the truck in front of you brakes, we have systems that now will be able, by filming you, to detect if you're not paying attention and help you adjust the behavior, or drive properly so that no accidents occur. But it can also be detecting that you're falling asleep. It can be detecting, um, so as part of full automation, drivers will be able to um, start working, or read books or watch movies while the the car is on automated pilot, or fully automated. But the what's most likely going to happen is that at first there will only be certain situation. For example, if you're on the highway, where you can have full automation, and so you will need, when the driving responsibility goes from the car back to the driver, you will need some ways to assess that the driver is fit to take the wheel back. And so those monitoring systems become mandatory and extremely important in that prospect.
Okay, thank you. There are some many different types you
Yeah.
mentioned, and I can imagine. Well, you already mentioned that there are some dangers in combination with those features. Can you elaborate on that? Like, what are the dangers, and what can we do, or what does Europe do about those dangers, or is Europe even addressing those dangers sufficiently?
Europe definitely is addressing those issues. So with automation, there are mainly two stakes that are very important and that need to be addressed. The first one is the security and the reduction of accidents,
Mhm.
which I already talked a little bit about. To give you some numbers, in France, the number of accidents represents about 0.5% of all death year round. So it seems to be very little, but when you go a little deeper in the statistics, you realize that it is actually the first cause of death for young people from 18 to 24. And I think that shows very well how important this issue is. And so automation, and not just automation, the vehicle driving by itself, but also the safety features that come with automation are very important in that prospect. Uh, Either to reduce the number of deathly accidents, but also to mitigate the consequences of accidents, or to prevent accidents from happening altogether. The second stake that comes with automation is ecology and climate change, and mostly uh, carbon emissions. And there are different ways in which it happens. So first of all, out of global emissions, total world emissions, driving a car as a personal driver represents about 4 to 5% of total emissions. The act of driving a car. If you include all the trucks, it's about 8-9%, and that's excluding making the car, but just the act of driving the car. And so that shows two things. First, it shows that car emissions are not negligible, because it's altogether about 10% of a little less than 10% of global worldwide carbon emissions. But it also shows that it's not the main issue, and that by the focus should not only be on car emissions when you address climate change.
Mm.
And there are many ways that you can act upon emissions that automation will help. Well, first of all, we said it with the reduction of accidents. It means that you have to create less cars if cars hold longer and are safer. And so that's already a point. The other thing is that automation creates new possibilities when it comes to mobility, and in particular with car sharing. We'll have a new public transport that might arise thanks to automation, where the car will be able to pick up people at their place and drive them where they are. And in doing so and having a fleet that's shared, you will actually have less cars that are used constantly or more efficiently, rather than today where, for example, my father doesn't need to take the car to go to his work, and so the car sits um, during the entire week, and it's only being used when he goes on weekends somewhere. And so by having a shared fleet, this reduces the number of cars that you actually need to make, and it makes a better use of them. And then finally, there are different strategy with automation where you can, we humans have a very specific way of driving cars, but leave it to, uh, if you design algorithms that drive the car for you, you will be able to uh, implement eco driving, and so ways of driving that are less that create less emissions. When it comes to Europe, Europe has definitely addressed the issue. I'm more acquainted with the social and the reduction of accident aspects. Europe had made its goal to, I think, over the decade 2010 to 2020, to divide by two the number of accidents in Europe. And the first few years that I think till 2015 or 16, Europe was on the right track. It was reducing the number of accidents properly, but then it plateaued at about the same number. And the reasoning right now is that in order to reduce the number of accidents even more, we need new technology and new systems that allow us to reduce accidents. And that's where automation and the systems that I talked about a little bit earlier
Mhm.
come into place. When it comes to emissions, as some of you may know, Europe works, they vote a budget for 7 years. So we had a cycle from 2013 to 2020 that just ended, and there was one that was voted just recently, I believe, that's called the European Green Deal, and that will fund from 2021 to 2027. And that's focused a lot on um, addressing climate change and fostering the economy in doing so. And so the car emissions, automated car, and a closely related topic sometimes, which is electric cars, are in the scope of that New Deal, and will be fostered by European policies too.
Okay. Maybe I just saw that one of our viewers has a question. Maybe we can answer them like after my last bigger question and address them. But what do you consider like what do you think is the best course of action for those fully automated vehicles?
Um, so it's difficult to say. I can't set out a one course of action, but I think what I would like to emphasize is that when it comes to the future of automation, what's more important, and maybe what Europe needs to be more careful about, is that the methodology is more important than the technology.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is that when we automated airplanes, for example, airplanes are a lot more automated than vehicles. Um, uh, a lot of accidents happen because every time we had a piece of technology that we thought could solve something, we just added that technology in the plane, and then it became overwhelming for the pilots and the crew. Um, and we still see it today where there's some European projects that are funded where they they fund projects who with reasoning is we have this new piece of technology, how can we value it? And I don't think personally that this is a good methodology. The methodology that you need to have is to on you need to address you need to have objectives which we already mentioned, accident reduction and climate change,
Mm,
and then you need to understand why drivers behave the way that they behave. And once you've understood that, you can use the technology to modify the reason why the the way that they behave. And you cannot add just simply technology and expect drivers to adapt the right way.
mm,
There are multiple instances of how this has proven dangerous actually. And sometimes you add technology to a vehicle and it makes things more dangerous.
mm,
For example, in California, some of the studies show that if you so one of the benefits of automation would be that the two cars could be closer together because the reaction time of the automated vehicle is slower. You have lower safe distances. And so if a driver uses an automated car, or he will get used to that short distance,
okay.
and then he will internalize it. And when he drives a manual car again, he will naturally have lower distances with cars that are ahead of him, which might increase the number of accidents, which is what you're trying to not do.
Mm,
And so you have to take into consideration all of those aspects and not just foster new technology without trying to have a more precise vision um, about what you're trying to achieve and how, especially how you're trying to achieve that vision. Um, so European work, European Commission works in a way today where they rely on experts to address when they fund projects to foster automation and related subjects. And it's proven to work quite efficiently, but not it doesn't always work perfectly. And so yeah, maybe there would be. I don't have any advice, but maybe that's one way that they could improve.
well, thank you for now for like giving us an overview. I guess there are many more aspects you could talk about, but for
Mm.
now, it gives us like a little insight. Just can you see the questions?
Yeah, I'll read it. Do you want to read it out loud, maybe?
Yeah, sure, I can do it. In the event of an accident with autopilot, who do you think is to blame for the accident? The owner, the driver, the manufacturer, or perhaps the vehicle itself?
So this is one of the legal
Yeah.
barriers that are, I guess, slowing for good reason too, but slowing the penetration of automated cars on markets. The question, I would rephrase the question. So the goal is that during autopilot, it is the manufacturer that is responsible for an accident that occurs. But the question is weirdly phrased because let's say that you are at a red light and you're stopped, and a car comes and bumps to you, rear ends you in the back. You even if you're in autopilot, there's no reason why you would be blamed for that accident. So what is difficult is that the manufacturer, you need to understand how the accident happened. And so part of the European Commission's work was to make sure that there's some kind of data recorder that is like a black box that's in the car,
Mm,
and in to record all the signals that it can from the car and understand what failed, if it's, and that's how you determine whether or not who was responsible, because you can still be in autopilot and the driver uses the steering wheel in the
mhm.
bad way or exactly, and during autopilot mode, this is this is what the vision is. I would like to add though that with growing concern about data privacy, European Commission has also made sure that those data recorder or black box cannot hold the information longer than a certain time.
Okay.
So my memory is failing me, but I think it's 5 minutes before an accident, everything stays recorded, and after that, it progressively as you gets deleted in order to protect citizens. So to me, and I think that's the most difficult question to answer, is what happens during transition. So we see it as autopilot on one side and then manual driving on the other side. The truth is they are in autopilot mode in most cars. When automation will arrive, it will only be in certain situations. And so there will be instances where you go from manual driving to autopilot or from autopilot to manual driving. And those transitions do not happen in a fraction of a second. They actually take time. And so if an accident happens during that time, this is where I think it gets a little trickier to understand who is to blame between the driver and the manufacturer.
Okay. There is another question I see. Well, just going to read it aloud again. Which company is right now the closest one to become the first car maker to sell a complete self-driving car, and when will it happen? Can you give us some thoughts about that?
The $1 billion question. So I'm not going to risk trying to figure out when it happens because in a way it already exists. We already have cars that know how to self-drive. So not completely, not in all driving situations. But for example, the Tesla in Europe, they're not allowed. Technically, the driver is supposed to always be looking at the road and monitoring the autopilot. But what the police and the feedback that we have is that people actually use it as an autopilot car. Google had made an experiment that found to be quite interesting, which was that they asked people, they had a self-driving car and they just let everyone that wanted go in the driving car and use it. And with the specific instruction that was to always be monitoring what was the car and always be behind the steering wheel. And what they noticed is that after 2 or 3 trips, people did not even sit behind the steering wheel. They were mostly in the back seats and playing games and just trusting the vehicle. So right now, a lot of different car makers are able to produce a self-driving car. The main issues right now, so they are able to, the technology somewhat exists, even though there's still sometimes some improvements. The questions are both legal, and we just talked about that before with Dominique's question, and also situations. And that's becoming the most important stake in the development, is to understand how you validate those systems, because you can have a car that works perfectly fine in all the situations that you've tried, and there's situations that the car maker has not expected. And so that will be the key in determining when they will be released on market. I'm not sure that I'm being very clear, but the issue is not the technology right now, is to validate that the technology is mature enough and safe enough.
Okay, thank you. Reinhard, you're more than welcome to ask questions as well.
If I may, I would like to ask one question, a practical question. We have a lot of assistants in our cars nowadays, and any new generation has new assistants, and we get used to it step by step. But when you change a car, and when you have an older car and then you are driving a newer car, you have to get used to all these assistants, and sometimes it's confusing. To give you a very simple example, I rented a car because with some friends I had to take a longer distance. And after some hours of driving, I was the driver, I saw something blinking, like a cup of coffee. And then the car said, you are tired, you have to make a stop.
Yeah.
But I was not tired. Yeah, we had a good conversation while driving. So what is the future of such assistance? Does that mean that in the future, the car sees that you are really tired, is taking over, guiding you to the next parking places, and you cannot restart the car before you prove that you had a small sleep or whatever? Because these are two big questions. The one is the legal one and the one is the technical one.
So yeah, there are different parts in your question. First of all, addressing all the different systems that exist, and sometimes the same system is in different cars made by different car makers, but it's called something different, or it appears. Sometimes it appears on the right, sometimes on the left, sometimes yeah. So that's something that's called commonality, and that's one of the issues facing automation. Uh, so commonalities, for example, there are no rules today. If you do not have if you have a manual stick, there are no rules that say that the left pedal should be the clutch, the center one the braking, and the right one acceleration. This has become what they call commonality. It's because all the car makers with time harmonized the way that they made their cars. And that's something that um, the European Union, and I think the European Commission does that, tries to foster is to make sure that they have similar, or at least common things, so that it's easier to go from use one car and then another one and not be completely lost. Um, the second question regarding the tired symbol alert that showed up right now. So this will evolve with the technology. Right now, what happened to you is, if I'm not mistaken, one of two things. Either the car realized that you were driving for more than 2 hours. It was just a timestamp, and so it said, "All right, you have to stop now and take a break," which is like level 0 of technology. It's just a watch or a timing device. Um, the other thing that may have occurred is that there are algorithms that detect how you drive and use your steering wheel. Um, so when we are wide awake and and we're driving, we constantly make micro adjustments. We constantly move the steering wheel, even if it's just a little bit. Um, and so, but when you start falling asleep, when you're drowsy, what happens is that uh, those movements become larger and larger because your adjustments needs, since you haven't been paying attention for a fraction of a second, the adjustments are bigger. And so that may be what happens. Um, Regarding the future of those technology, I think expecting the car to forbid you from driving will not happen because the population will never accept it. And as you said, it would be weird to stop. It would be counterproductive for safety reasons, because some drivers might think, well, I don't want to have the car decide if I'm fit to drive or not. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a car that does not have that feature. And if it does not have that feature, most likely it does not have safety features. And so the goal that we're trying to achieve, reduction of accidents, it will definitely not happen. Right now, the European Commission's um, policy is that there is no active, um, the car cannot make decisions for you. The only thing they can do is send alerts. Um, the car maker can decide to make those alerts as annoying as possible, and maybe you will choose a different car because you think the alerts are too annoying. But this is the only thing that will be mandatory in the near future, and until the technology is more mature and realize if you're drowsy. I don't know if I understand. I answered all your questions, but
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you.
I think there are no further questions.
Oh.
Oh, there is a follow-up question. Volvo will be one of the first car makers to forbid you to drive faster than allowed. Is that the future, and will other car makers follow?
So I don't work for a car maker, so it's a difficult question to answer for me. Is that the future? It may be. I don't think that anyone can answer that question right now, and I think people should not forget that we are part of those decisions. If Pan-Europe exists, if the European Commission has members of parliament that are elected, it's because we have a say in it, and that we can shape that future ourselves through associations or political parties or others. It will be. I do not know how to answer that question honestly, because I don't know if that's going to be the future at all. It raises some concerns. What if someone is having a heart attack in your car and you are willing to go faster than the speed limit to get to the hospital on an empty road? So it raises a lot of questions, and yeah, I'm not one. I don't make those decisions, so I can't help.
Since we already talked about over 30 minutes, to not exhaust our viewers, I think we're going to end it here. Thank you, Rainer. Thank you, Alexandre. And well, anyone who wants to rewatch this video can do this on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. It's C'l'Europe, es ist Europa. And well, I guess there's nothing else to be said except like stay safe, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you very much, Eliza.
Bye.